kids' clothes in the attic, stuffed away like someone was like living up in there. And the whole entire house was just urine and human and cat feces, so it was pretty rough.
In October of 2021, a sheriff's deputy in Gallia County, Ohio, drove out to a house in the small community of Cheshire to serve court papers on 2 parents. 6 of their children had stopped showing up at Ataville Elementary School. Not days of absence, months. Enough that a juvenile court had opened cases and was preparing to declare the children habitually truant. The deputy knocked. Nobody answered. The family inside that file is one the entire country now knows by name. That was the only documented attempt. The family's whereabouts were entered into the record as unknown, and within about 3 months, a judge closed every one of the 6 cases. Not resolved, not referred, closed, because the people named in them could not be found. The file died in the winter of 2021. 5 years later, deputies 70 miles away opened a door on a dead-end road in Vinton County, and the children from that dead file, along with 10 more, were carried out of a single room. And this week, a man hired to rehab the house the family abandoned in Cheshire told reporters what he found inside it. Feces, human and animal, through the rooms. And in the attic, piles of children's clothes, as if someone had been living up there. Before we go on, this case involves the endangerment of children, and parts of tonight's reporting are difficult. We will not be showing the children or describing their conditions, but if this subject is heavy for you, take care while watching. If you're new here, this is Quiet Record. Verified reporting, named experts, no invented forensics. Subscribe if that's the coverage you want. Tell me in the comments what city and country you're watching from. And to everyone who has shared and commented through the first 2 episodes on this case, the questions you keep asking are the reason this coverage exists. Thank you. Because this week, the paper trail everyone said didn't exist was published. A state legislature wrote a $1 million check because of it. And a court began ordering the people who know the most to stop talking about it. Tonight, the file that died, and the silence being built around everything it touches. Start with the records themselves, because they are no longer anyone's anonymous sourcing. They are documents. ABC 6, investigates in Columbus, obtained the Gallia County court filings. In the fall of 2021, the local school district filed complaints against Elizabeth and Gary Siders Jr. over 6 of their oldest children, ages roughly 7 to 13 at the time. The children were enrolled in the district that includes Ataville Elementary, and then they simply stopped appearing. The complaints describe more than 72 hours of unexcused absences, months out of the classroom, and warn that the children were at risk of being formally designated unruly under Ohio law. Understand what that means for everything we have reported before. The record now shows that at least 6 of these children were at one point inside a school system. Teachers had their names on rosters. A district office generated attendance records, then absence records, then legal complaints. The system did not merely glimpse this family. For a window of time in 2021, part of it was actively pursuing them through a courtroom. And then the pursuit ended. One service attempt by the Gallia County Sheriff's Office in October 2021. One knock on one door. Whereabouts unknown. Cases terminated. No referral to children's services appears in what has been published. No alert to the counties the family might move to next. Ohio's own systems had just documented 6 children vanishing from education entirely, and the legal consequence was a closed folder in a courthouse in one of the smallest counties in the state. A neighbor near that Cheshire house, Melissa Edmonds, told ABC 6 the family's departure was so quiet that nobody registered it. In her words, "We did not know they had even left for quite a while. It was kind of just an empty house, left a mess, and not really in that great of condition." Left a mess is doing heavy lifting in that sentence, which brings us to the man with the keys. The house the family abandoned in Cheshire eventually passed to someone hired to rehabilitate it. This week he described to ABC 6 what the interior held. Urine and feces, human and pet, through the house. His word for the state of it, rough. And upstairs, in the attic, a large quantity of children's clothing, arranged in a way that suggested to him that someone had been living up there. We do not know what the attic was. Nobody on the record does. What the rehabber's account establishes, at minimum, is this. The conditions investigators described on Omer Road in June of 2026 were not a sudden collapse unique to one address. Something very similar existed in the house the family left behind, which dates the squalor back at least to the era of the truancy cases, in a different county, under a different roof. And the roofs keep multiplying, except now they come with documents attached. 10TV in Columbus has obtained birth records for 15 of the 16 children, and because Ohio birth records require a home address, those 15 documents draw the family's entire migration in their own handwriting. A home in Gallipolis in 2008, a move to Bidwell in 2009, and then, the detail nobody expected, the same Bidwell house for 7 straight years, 2009 to 2016. Whatever this family became, for 7 years in the middle of it, they were stable. Then the moving starts. A second Bidwell address, another in Gallipolis, then the house on Honeysuckle Drive in Cheshire. The truancy address, the attic address. From Gallia, the trail touches Jackson County and Pike County. And then, on the birth record for the twins delivered in November 2022, an address that breaks the pattern entirely. Bloomer, Wisconsin. Here is where this week's most quietly explosive reporting lands. 10TV called the owner of that Wisconsin property. He told them nobody was living there in 2022. The property had been vacant since 2017 and was demolished around the time the Siders listed it as home. His father checked the land every week or so. Shown the family's photographs, he said he had never seen these people in his life. Now set that against something the Gallia County superintendent explained to 10TV on Background about how truancy pursuit works. The district keeps trying to find missing children unless one of two things happens: evidence they enrolled elsewhere, or evidence they moved out of state. A Wisconsin address is precisely the kind of fact that ends an Ohio truancy case. Whether that is what the Bloomer address accomplished, no official has said, and it remains firmly in the category of open question. But the timeline is on paper. The truancy cases died in January 2022 because the family could not be found. Months later, an Ohio hospital birth record listed their home as a demolished house 800 miles away. And the records hold one more contradiction. Authorities have said their belief is the family spent the last 4 years in the Omer Road house. The birth records disagree. As late as the 2025 twins, the family's listed address in Hamden was the other house, the one on Main Street, just up the road. When they actually moved into the house where the children were found is now, like so much else, an open question the sealed investigation will have to answer. 6 counties worth of addresses across 2 decades. A dead court file in one of them, a ruined house in another, a phantom address in a 3rd state. That is the shape of the migration. And this week, for the first time, it is drawn from records rather than rumor. Here is where I ask for the one thing that keeps this kind of coverage possible. Everything in this episode, the truancy filings, the testimony before the state controlling board, the gag order fight now heading to Ohio's highest court, is the unglamorous middle of a case, the part most channels skip because it doesn't trend. This channel committed to the middle. Subscribing is how you vote for that. One tap, and you're part of the audience that keeps asking after the cameras thin out. Now stay with me, because the money question in this case just flipped upside down. For 2 weeks, the working assumption in almost all coverage, ours included, was that a family this size, this poor, delivering babies in hospitals, was resting on a foundation of public assistance. This week, that assumption met the officials, and it did not survive intact. Prosecutor William Archer has said the only government benefits he was aware of went to the grandparents, Gary Sr. and Christina, in the form of Social Security. State Representative Mark Johnson, whose district covers all of Vinton County, went further in a sit-down interview with Law and Crime's Angenette Levy. To his knowledge, Gary Jr. and Elizabeth received no SNAP benefits, no monthly stipend, no state assistance of any kind for 16 children. The state agencies themselves cannot legally confirm or deny individual benefit records. Privacy law forbids it. But the picture assembled from the people closest to the case is consistent. The only visible income in that 20-person household was 2 Social Security checks. Sit with the strangeness of that. This is not a family that milked a system. By every account now on the record, it is a family that asked the system for almost nothing. No food assistance, no cash aid, apparently no unemployment, while 16 children lived behind one door. Representative Johnson said it plainly. It doesn't make sense. If you are not working and you have 16 children, the refusal to seek help is itself one of the loudest facts in this case. And the births themselves are no longer approximations. They are records with hospital names on them. Per the 15 birth documents, 10 TV obtained, every child born between 2008 and 2022 was delivered at Holzer Medical Center in Gallipolis, the Gallia County hospital serving the towns the family lived in. The conjoined twins, in November 2022, were delivered at Riverside Hospital in Columbus, a major metropolitan facility, which is what a pregnancy that dangerous requires, and they lived for about an hour. The final 2 sets of twins were delivered at Obelness Hospital in Athens, the same hospital, as it happens, where Gary Sr. would be taken after his fall this month. Count the twins across the records and there are 4 sets. Count the institutions and there are 3 hospital systems, in 3 cities, each holding its own fragment of this family's file, with nothing connecting fragment to fragment, which is precisely the wound the state has now been forced to look at. This week, the head of Ohio's Department of Children and Youth, Joel Potts, appeared before the state controlling board. The occasion, an emergency request for $1 million to fund the care of the 16 children, a caseload that effectively doubled a county child welfare system overnight. The board approved it unanimously. Vinton County operates on roughly an $8 million annual budget. Representative Johnson noted that no local levy in a county that small could ever absorb an event like this. The $1 million is not generosity, it is arithmetic. But the testimony around the money is where the real story sits. A senior official told the hearing that in 40 years he had never seen anything like it. That 1 child off the radar is terrible enough, and 16 in a single household was something he had simply never encountered. Johnson says he asked Potts directly, "Did anybody drop the ball? Did anybody fail to do their job?" And the answer he received was no. 2 practical notes wrote along with the $1 million. First, the appropriation is projected to last roughly a year, for 16 children whose needs will run far longer. Second, for everyone asking how to help directly, the state says there is currently no legitimate way to get donations to these children. Accounts are being set up. Until the state announces them, anyone online collecting money in these children's names is collecting it for themselves. Hold those 2 statements next to each other. Nobody dropped the ball. And a juvenile court documented 6 of these children disappearing from school in 2021, attempted service once, and closed the file. Both of those are now on the public record. Ohio's promised review will eventually have to decide whether they can both be true. To his credit, Potts did not stop at defense. His prescription, in his own words, "We need more eyes on children. If you see something, say something." His department, he testified, has had staff on the ground in Vinton County every single day since June 30th. And in the legislature, the appetite for structural change is forming in real time. Senator George Lang put it in one sentence: "I'd rather err on putting too much funds into children's services than not enough." Johnson's own list of what he calls low-hanging fruit: communication between counties when a family under scrutiny relocates, more follow-up visits once a complaint is filed, better use of the complaint database the Department of Children and Youth already maintains. And a harder question hovering behind all of it: Ohio repealed its homeschool oversight requirements in 2023, which means a family that never enrolls its children now faces even fewer mandatory checkpoints than the ones that failed here. Representative Johnson did something else most officials in this case have not. He went to the House. He drove to Hamden himself, he told Levy, because he wanted to represent the district with his own eyes. What he found explains more about concealment than any statute. Omer Road is a dead end. One other home sits across from the Siders' house. Woods and foliage wrap the property on its sides. The front faces a railroad yard. It is, in his description, about as secluded as a village address can be. The one neighbor told people he could not recall ever seeing a child. Then Johnson canvassed the village the way a local would. The hardware store told him Gary Jr. had come in exactly once, over a year ago, to buy plumbing supplies and was never seen again. The family's only reliable public appearances were at the Dollar General after 9:30 at night, close to dusk or full dark, routinely the last customers of the day. And Johnson dismantled, gently but firmly, the easiest explanation in circulation. This is not a jobless wasteland. A Pillsbury food processing plant, employing more than 1,000 people, sits within 5 miles of Hamden, in Wellston. Jackson County's industrial employers are 15 minutes up the road, alongside a Walmart. Chillicothe's truck assembly supply chain employs some 1,300 people, many of them Vinton County residents. Workers, Johnson says, that employers actively prefer because they show up. The village itself runs on exactly that ethic. Its fire department, one of the best in his district, funds itself on weekly bingo nights and volunteers. Work existed, help existed, neighbors existed. The family declined all three, after dark, at the end of a dead-end road. None of it, in Johnson's own summary, makes any sense. And the question he says he cannot stop turning over is the one that hangs over this entire case. What makes 4 adults agree that this is okay? That question now has a new voice attached to it, from inside the family itself. This week, a woman identifying herself as the niece of Gary Sr. and Christina posted a public statement. We are quoting it because it is the first extended account from a relative of the grandparents' generation, and because what she describes complicates every simple version of this story. She wrote that she was raised knowing her aunt and uncle as clean, respectful, and lovable people, that she remembers their home, years ago, as clean, smelling of lavender, toys on the floor but never dirty, that she knows the 3 oldest girls. And then the sentence that stops you, my aunt and uncle would not harm a child in their right state of mind. In their right state of mind, she has not seen them in over 6 years. Her heart, she wrote, tells her their health was deteriorating. She names cancer, strokes, and dementia. And then she goes further than any official has. I believe in my heart that Gary Jr. was abusive to them. Be clear about what that is and is not. It is one relative's belief, posted publicly, about a man who has not been charged with anything involving his parents, and who is presumed innocent of everything he is charged with. It is not evidence, but notice what it aligns with. A grandfather whose competency is now under court-ordered evaluation. A family photograph from 2023 showing the grandparents composed and ordinary. A niece describing a lavender-scented home that existed within living memory. Every independent thread in this case keeps pointing at the same unnerving shape. Whatever this household became, there are people who insist it was not always this, and a medical and legal record beginning to ask when and why it changed. The family record turned one more shade darker this week. The Columbus Dispatch published an exclusive. Court records reveal 3 teen marriages inside this family, Elizabeth's at 15 being only one of them. We are not going to detail the other 2 until we have examined those records ourselves. But a documented multi-generational pattern of children marrying as children reframes Elizabeth's 2008 wedding from an aberration into an inheritance. And it hands both the prosecution and the defense material they will each read very differently. There were also newly released records this week of a more procedural kind. Booking and search footage from the jail, obtained by reporters through records requests, and accounts of the children having been seen publicly at a food bank in their grandmother's company. Small fragments. But each one is another entry in the ledger. This case keeps forcing longer. The moments this family was seen. And what of the 16 themselves? The question Levy put directly in the title of her newest broadcast. The kids are safe, but are they all right? Here is the honest answer. The public does not know, and mostly will not. All 16 remain with foster families more than 2 weeks after the rescue. Representative Johnson, asked whether they are even still in Vinton County, said he genuinely does not know, and doubts the least populous county in Ohio could hold enough foster homes for 16 children at once. Their conditions, their progress, their names, all of it is shielded by Ohio's juvenile privacy laws, and that shield is not an obstruction. It is the one part of the system working exactly as designed. The same law that keeps you from getting an update is the law standing between these children and every camera in America. What the state is building behind that shield did surface, briefly, At the funding hearing, officials referenced the department's Child Wellness Campus, a project intended to provide longer-term placements for children exactly like these, beyond the emergency foster stage. The $1 million is triage. The campus is the acknowledgement that 16 children with these histories will need something no 2-week appropriation covers. Years. One more fragment from the family chapter belongs here, because it reframes a detail from earlier coverage. The older children's social media presence, the faceless accounts, now has 2 competing frames attached. The allegation taking shape in this week's reporting is that the children were not allowed outside, but were given phones. Elizabeth's attorney, Thomas Stolley, put the defense version on camera for 10 TV, and it is the most direct pushback yet. There is, he says, no evidence of restraints in that home, no evidence the children were locked in or forced to remain in the 12 by 12 room. That part, in his words, has been sensationalized on the internet. He has visited Elizabeth in jail 3 times. Every visit, he says, she spends much of the time talking about her children. The older kids had phones and social media. They had, she told him, little inside jokes with each other. And when care packages arrived for her at the jail, she brought his team a letter asking whether the items could be sent to her kids instead. Johnson added that the extended family itself communicated with the household mainly through social media. If the allegation and the defense account both hold, the picture resolves into something stranger than isolation. A family sealed off from every physical system, school, medicine, aid, neighbors, while remaining faintly deniably reachable online. The internet was the one window nobody thought to check. Whether the people inside it were prisoners, participants, or something the law has no clean word for, is now exactly what a trial exists to decide. Before the courtrooms, one more scene from Omer Road itself. Because while the legal system debates what the public may know, the public has started taking the question into its own hands. The house is not guarded. There is no deputy posted. The police tape that went up on June 30th has begun to sag, and a steady stream of cars now rolls down that dead-end road. Locals, followers of the case, people who have driven from an hour away, reportedly from out of state, to look at it. A window is broken. Neighbors told 10 TV they have watched people cross the tape and go inside. The neighbors have responded the way people do when their street becomes a pilgrimage site. New security cameras on their homes, fresh no trespassing signs that were not there 2 weeks ago. Which reframes something we told you last episode. The interior images circulating online are worse than fabricated. Some are likely AI, but some may be real photographs taken by people who broke into an active crime scene. Prosecutor Archer would not verify any of them, and his office cannot release interior images of its own. What he did say, plainly, anyone entering that property faces a potential trespassing charge, and potentially the more serious charge of obstruction, and his office is actively investigating who has been going in. Either way, the rule for viewers is unchanged and now stronger. Every interior image of that house currently online is either an invention or evidence of a crime. This channel will show you neither, which makes what happened in the courtrooms this week the most consequential development of all. Because the response to all this visibility has been an organized attempt to end it. A judge has granted a gag order in Gary Siders Jr.'s case, sought by his attorney, R. Lee Roberts. The motion's language is worth quoting, because it is the defense's entire theory of this moment. The descriptions issued by public officials, it argues, seek to do nothing other than inflame the heart and passion of the potential jurors. A concern amplified, it adds, by the smallness of the community those jurors will come from. And Roberts named names. The Attorney General who said pure evil. The sheriff who said livestock was kept better. And, in the strangest detail of this entire week, a man named Jeremiah Griffith, who is cited in the order because he gave an interview about carrying children to the hospital as a volunteer firefighter on June 30th, and who also happens to be the Vinton County Clerk of Courts, the official whose office will process every filing in these 4 cases. In a county of 13,000 people, the man who helped rescue the children and the man who stamps the paperwork of their parents' prosecution are the same man. That is what a case this size does to a county this small. Under the order, the officials who know this case best are barred from public comment while the questions multiply. Christina Siders' attorneys have now asked for a second, broader non-dissemination order restricting what any party can release about evidence, witnesses, and discovery. The remaining defense attorneys, including Dorian Baum, told 10TV they are checking whether the existing order silences them too, since 4 separate cases are, in practice, one intertwined story. The era of forthcoming attorneys in this case may have just ended on all sides, and the fight over that silence has already escalated as far as it can go in this state. The gag order in Gary Jr.'s case is now being challenged at the Supreme Court of Ohio. Sit with the collision this creates. In the same 7 days, Ohio's legislature demanded answers about structural failure and wrote an emergency check, while Ohio's courts began sealing the mouths of everyone positioned to give those answers. Both can be legally proper. Gag orders protect fair trials. These defendants are entitled to one. Nothing about the orders is proof of anything hidden. But the practical effect is not ambiguous. From here forward, the flow of verified information in this case narrows to filings, hearings, and whatever the state's highest court decides the public is permitted to hear. One more thing narrowed this week: certainty about how this case even began. From the start, the official account was a search warrant in a separate, unrelated investigation. Angenette Levy has reported she was told directly that it was a felony matter, and specifically not the public indecency case pending against Gary Jr. This week, other outlets and commentators began reporting the opposite, that the warrant deputies carried to Omer Road that morning was connected to the indecency case after all. Those accounts cannot both be right. The affidavit that would settle it remains sealed. On this channel, the origin of the June 30th warrant is now officially listed as disputed, and the dispute itself tells you something, because 5 weeks in, the public still does not know why the police were at that house. While the silence takes shape, the legal machinery underneath it keeps turning, and this week put names and voices to what comes next. The judge now holding the center of this case is Vinton County's Lena Featherolf Rogers. Elizabeth Sider's motion for release without cash bail sits on her desk, still unanswered by the prosecution. And when that hearing happens, it will be the first contested courtroom argument this case has seen. The commentary arriving around it signals how the profession is reading the moment. Tommy Pope, a former prosecutor turned legal analyst, looked at Elizabeth's circumstances and called them close to the worst he had ever seen, a characterization that cuts in both directions. It is the state's case against her, and it is her attorney's argument about what she may have survived. And for the grand jury, the most useful voice this week was a man who used to run these exact proceedings. Aaron Payne, a former Vinton County prosecutor, walking the public through what the process will actually look like in a county this size. Grand juries are secret by law. No defense attorneys in the room. No judge presiding over the presentation. The prosecution, now 3 prosecutors deep, lays out its evidence to local citizens, alone, and asks for an indictment. Whatever that panel returns will supersede the current 16 counts entirely. It can match them, it can multiply them, it can add charges from the sealed investigation nobody has been allowed to see. And once it returns, the complaint stage numbers everyone has been analyzing for 3 weeks become a historical footnote. Representative Johnson, for his part, offered the local read. He believes the county has a good judge. Notes the prosecutor was wise enough to request the Attorney General's reinforcements and is confident the defendants will get the fair trial they are entitled to. That last phrase is not a nicety. In a case this inflamed, the fair trial is the one outcome that protects everyone, including the children, whose futures depend on verdicts that survive appeal. So here is where the file that died in 2021 leaves us. It proves the thesis this coverage has been building for 2 episodes. Not with sources, with paper. A school district saw 6 of these children. A court reached for them. A sheriff knocked once. And the machinery that should have chased 16 vanishing children across county lines instead closed 6 folders and moved on. When the head of the state's child welfare department says, "Nobody dropped the ball," he may even be right in the narrowest sense. Every individual may have followed every procedure that existed. That is exactly the indictment. The procedures themselves had a hole in them the size of a family of 20, and the hole has a date on it now. Winter 2021, Gallia County, Ohio. What the file cannot do is answer the question the niece's letter and the attic in Cheshire force open. What happened inside this family, and when? A home that smelled of lavender within one relative's memory. A house abandoned around 2021, already in ruin. Health collapsing, if she is right, under cancer and strokes and dementia. A grandson, she believes, turned on his own parents. A courtroom now formally asking whether the oldest defendant can even understand the proceedings against him. The system's failure has a paper trail. The family's failure still only has theories. As of this recording, here is the honest ledger. What is true? 6 truancy cases were filed over 6 Siders children in Gallia County in the fall of 2021. 1 service attempt was made, and the cases were terminated when the family could not be located. The abandoned Cheshire house was found in squalor, children's clothes in its attic, by the man rehabbing it. 10 TV has obtained birth records for 15 of the 16 children, every birth from 2008 to 2022, at Holzer in Gallipolis, the conjoined twins at Riverside in Columbus, the final 2 twin sets at Obelness in Athens, 4 sets of twins in all, and a 7-year stretch in 1 Bidwell home. The 2022 birth record lists a Bloomer, Wisconsin address, whose owner says the property was vacant and demolished, and that he never saw this family. Officials say the only known benefits in the household were the grandparents' Social Security. The parents, per Representative Johnson, apparently sought no state assistance. The Ohio Controlling Board unanimously approved $1 million in emergency funding, projected to last about a year. A gag order sought by attorney R. Lee Roberts stands in Gary Jr.'s case, citing the Attorney General, the Sheriff, and Clerk of Courts Jeremiah Griffith, and is under challenge at the Supreme Court of Ohio. A second restrictive order has been requested in Christina's case. The Columbus Dispatch reports court records showing 3 teen marriages in the family. All 4 defendants have pleaded not guilty and are presumed innocent. What is theory? Why the truancy cases were never escalated or referred, and whether the Wisconsin address is connected to their termination, which no official has stated. Whether the June 30th warrant grew from the indecency case or a separate felony investigation, the reporting now conflicts. When the family actually moved from Main Street to Omer Road, which the birth records now put in doubt. The niece's account of the grandparents' health and her belief about Gary Jr., which is her stated conviction and nothing more. And every explanation of why a family with access to jobs, aid, and neighbors chose isolation instead. What is invention, or worse? Any claim that the truancy records show children's services was formally involved. The published records show a school district and a court, and the rest is not yet established. Any detail of the other 2 teen marriages beyond the dispatch's reporting. Any account currently collecting donations for these children. The state says no legitimate channel exists yet. And every interior image of that house circulating online, which is now either AI fabrication or a photograph taken by someone who broke into an active crime scene. If someone shows you the inside of that house, what they are showing you is either fake or a crime. If you suspect a child in your community is being neglected or abused, Ohio's hotline is 1-855-OH-CHILD, 1-855-642-4453. You do not need certainty. You do not need proof. Reasonable suspicion is the entire threshold, and the professionals take it from there. Somewhere in Gallia County in 2021, the distance between a closed file and a rescue was 1 phone call nobody was required to make. In your county, tonight, you are allowed to be the person who makes it anyway. One last thing before you go. The most important sentence spoken in this case this week was 6 words long. Delivered to a state hearing room. Nobody dropped the ball. 5 months from now, Ohio's review will have to publish its verdict on that sentence, with the truancy file sitting in evidence against it. Between now and then, a gag order will decide how much you and I are allowed to watch. The Supreme Court of Ohio will decide the gag order. And the only pressure that reliably survives all of it is an audience that refuses to wander off. Subscribing is how you stay that audience. Through the Supreme Court fight, through the grand jury, expected any week now, through the moment the sealed affidavit finally opens and we learn, at last, why the police were really at that door. If a file that died 5 years before anyone came looking matters to you, be here when they finally answer for it. The file existed. The court closed it. This week, Ohio finally had to read it. I'll see you on the next one.